Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, a podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on Carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. William Shewfelt is returning for his third time on the Carnivore Cast. Check out parts 1 and 2 with William if you missed them. They're two of my favorite episodes. He was guest number 1 and is the author of the Carnivore Shredding program, podcast host of the Will to Win podcast, and co-author of the PE Diet with Dr. Ted Naiman. William is an all-around Renaissance man, wise beyond his years, and someone I look to for advice and guidance, not only around nutrition, but life and mindset. Oh, and he's also the Red Power Ranger on Nickelodeon. Welcome back, William.
Thank you for having me back, Scott. How have you been?
Good. I've been really well. Got a new puppy, and my wife and I are moving to New York City soon. I just got a new job there, so a lot of life changes.
Fantastic! Congrats, man.
Thanks. But what have you been up to? What's new with you? Fill folks in on the last 6 months or so. What have you been focused on?
It has been a very exciting past 6 months. So my goal going into 2020 was basically to make this the year of acting for me. I had taken a good year and a half to really focus in more on writing the books, building my online business, building my social media platforms, the YouTube, the podcast, things like that. And when I did that, I knew at some point that I was going to return to acting, but I felt like I wanted to establish a voice for myself before I went into that again. Because there's different ways to approach it, but many actors will approach acting in a audition, take classes, and then get a side hustle, or the bus tables, do the Uber, things like that.
Right.
And I thought, man, the audition process, I'm like, how do you build value outside of that? Because you're sort of like going up there with your hands out and you're like, hey guys, hire me. And I was thinking I would so much rather build a platform and try to attract the sort of roles that I would like to eventually be in the future. So that's kind of the way that I mentally approached it. And that had to do with, building all the different platforms. But going into 2020, so for me, this was like the year of returning to acting. And, obviously God had different plans and he decided to throw a pandemic and some things like that in the way.
Yeah.
So Hollywood was a little bit in turmoil. A lot of productions got canceled or postponed, but it's still been an awesome year nonetheless. Right now I'm slated to play Nightwing in a series later this year. And it's Rise of the Red Hood. So I'm currently preparing for that. And then I'm also producing and starring in 2 web series. One is Rise of the Ninja that we've been teasing a lot on my social media. And then the other is called Solaris. And it's a really interesting story about the sun is basically ending, and it's starting to send these crazy solar flares that are actually hitting Earth, and it's breaking through the atmosphere. But it actually ends up endowing a lot of people that get hit with it with certain powers, and that's kind of like all I can tease about that for now. But that's what I've been doing in that area, in the acting, and I've also been spending a lot of time working on music recently. So that's kind of how my time has been spent recently.
Very, very cool. I love how you're able to go really deep on, the nutrition and fitness side and helping a bunch of people, and then shift back into and reorient your goals and dedicate yourself to acting in that way. That takes a lot of motivation and discipline, which you clearly have a lot of. So let's talk a little bit about the PE Diet book.
Mhm.
I mean, first of all, writing a book with Ted Naiman sounds like a dream. But
Yeah.
what is it about? What's the goal of the book?
Yeah. So the PE diet, this essentially came out of Dr. Ted Naiman was, I think, probably the most important health influence in my personal journey. So many people had different pieces of the puzzle and might specialize in a certain area. Somebody might be excellent with fasting or with carnivore or low carb or some different area. But Ted was one of the first people that kind of put everything together in a very cohesive, simple, practical way that was focused on prioritizing the things that really moved the needle and also not sweating some of the things that weren't as important. And the way that he presented this stuff, I think it appealed to so many people's goals. So many people had similar goals of like, look, I'm just trying to get in better shape and feel better and have more energy. And I don't want to devote my life to becoming necessarily a biohacker. I just want to get some great results. And the information that he put out, I think, more simply and concisely presented that than I had ever seen before. And I would always see comments like, Ted, are you ever going to release a book? Things like that. And he never had any plans to. And I had been wanting to write a book in the health and fitness space for a while. And I was toying with, how am I going to do this? What sort of information do I want to put out there? And when I finally stumbled upon the idea of, man, well, Ted kind of presents everything that I sort of believe in at this point. What if I was able to pitch the idea of us working on this book together and putting it out there? And it kind of took off from there. And it took us a good year to fully write this thing, put it together, and then to get it out there. And we're still in the process of working to partner with the right publisher and get it presented. But the ultimate goal of this book is that I always say this, I want my mom or dad to be able to pick this book up, and they are not in the whole health scene, but I want them to be able to pick this book up and within 30 seconds be able to take away something valuable from it. Be able to look at one of the graphics or flip through one of the recipes or look at the training part and to say, oh, that makes sense. Okay. Protein to energy ratio, and to see the graph and to see how, as you scale up the protein to energy ratio, how that would help. So that's my ultimate goal with this. We weren't trying to write a, necessarily an academic proposal or anything like that. We want to make this as simple as possible, democratize this information for everyone so that people are able to access it, use it. And the long-term goal is really to create a ripple effect in the whole health and fitness community where people can really understand and apply this stuff.
Yeah, I really like that obsession with democratizing health and fitness and making it dead simple so that people can understand it. And I think one of the first steps in that is just prioritizing protein. So many people are undereating protein, particularly animal protein. And it's an easy way to improve your diet without having to restrict a lot or take things out or make it harder for yourself. Just up the protein. Number one, first thing. So I really like that concept. And for people who are a little further along in their nutrition journey and maybe doing something like a carnivore diet, how does the PE diet fit in with that? And how does maybe the PE diet go beyond carnivore in some ways?
Yeah. So the PE diet, one of the things I love about this is we talk about how we're diet agnostic, where regardless of what approach you're following, there's always a way to increase your protein to energy ratio, which in the vast majority of cases, it's going to lead to better health outcomes in the long term and in the short term. Personally, I follow sort of a combination of carnivore diet and PE diet. So if you wanted to apply something like a PE diet to your carnivore diet, it's as simple as increasing the protein, sticking with whole food fats, and decreasing added fats. Obviously, carbs don't even come into the picture, so it's even more simple. But it's basically scaling up that protein to energy ratio. And some of the ways you can do that, if you're eating ribeyes, you can scale back to New York strip steak. If you are adding a lot of butter or tallow or ghee to things, you can scale back on some of those added fats and you can focus more on the protein. If you're consistently eating a lot more fat, maybe you could throw in a little bit more seafood every now and then. You might even be able to throw in some chicken. Maybe not the most nutrient dense thing, but it'll scale up your protein to energy ratio. So that's the idea behind it. And you can do this with any diet. We even talk about ways that you can do this with a plant-based diet or with a vegetarian diet. So we're really trying to make this a concept that anybody can apply. But for me, for example, this is something that I apply with my carnivore diet, where when I stopped adding so much fat to things, because I think all of us did this early on, whether it was a keto or a carnivore journey, we were doing a lot of extra added butters and oils and things like that. When I stopped adding those things and I started having I'm going to have a steak, eggs, I'll do maybe some Greek yogurt, things like that, and I'm not going to add fat to it. That's when I noticed that my body fat started dropping, but I was just as satiated. I was just as satiated as before. The muscle was there, the performance was there, but I was dropping body fat, and that was the missing piece of the puzzle for me. So, it's definitely something that you can apply to any diet. And you had another question. I think you said, how does the PE diet sort of go beyond the carnivore diet? So I would say, the PE diet, I would say one way that it's different from the carnivore diet is that it doesn't necessarily target plants as one of the root causes of, let's say, maybe chronic disease or autoimmunity or anything like that. And maybe to put it more simply, it's not demonizing plants in any way. All it's saying is to cut down on those added energy sources, the carbs and the fats, and to focus on prioritizing the protein, which is a slightly different slant than the carnivore diet takes, which, you are sort of looking to stay away from some of those plants. So it's just a different approach to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I'd love to get into some more of the specifics there and how you've applied some of that to your diet. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about your carnivore shredding challenges, which I've seen all over Instagram, which have been really cool. Can you talk about what that experience has been like and what some of the results people are getting are?
Yeah, those are so fun. Okay, so we have these 21-day carnivore shred challenges. And what we do is every month we'll pick a Monday at the beginning of the month, and we start with these challenges. And essentially it's a 21-day challenge that you do with a group of participants that sign up. You get sent a carnivore meal plan, and it's sort of customized to whether you want to do dairy, if you don't want to do dairy, if there's any foods that you have issues with. And then we also customize the macros based on your activity levels and your goals and things like that. And right now we're doing a lot more home workouts because obviously, I don't think I have to explain that, but we're giving a lot more home workouts out to people. And there's beginner, intermediate, advanced, things like that. So you get paired up with a workout with a meal plan. And then we also have this awesome, online community that we've created where every single day people are super active in the WhatsApp group, the Facebook group, posting up their meals, their workouts, motivational videos, who's up at 5 a.m., who's up at 6 a.m. It's just a fun community to be a part of. The awesome part of it is people are experiencing incredible results in 21 days without the kind of things that you would usually expect with sort of a short-term shred. So, the crazy hunger or the stress or things like that, because what we're trying to dial in is how do we make this the most sustainable and effective process possible, which for us means we're prioritizing protein, minerals, nutrients, salt, rest. We're decreasing some of that extremely glycolytic type cardio that some people would do that stresses the body or spikes the appetite. So we're trying to make sure that the training will accentuate the fat loss and help build and preserve muscle rather than beat them to a pulp. You see this a lot with like sort of short-term shredding challenges where it's just like hit and Tabata 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And it'll work for short-term fat loss, but it's kind of tough to maintain the results. So we're trying to make this the most sustainable process for people. And so the upcoming one that we have is on Monday, July 6th. So from the recording date of this podcast, that's about 9 or 10 days away. But yeah, it's just a really cool motivational process where we try to sprint to this 21-day finish line. And the goal of that is that people will take that momentum, they'll take what they learned, they'll take that motivation, and they'll be able to carry that into the next month.
Yeah, that's great. I really like how you're creating this platform and community that can scale and help a lot of people. And can you talk about some of the strategies or things you've learned from that, that like you didn't expect at first, things that were simpler than just applying kind of a carnivore template and certain exercise program that really made a difference in people's results or patterns you're seeing, anything like that? This episode is brought to you by Optimal Carnivore. Optimal Carnivore was created by carnivores for carnivores. They've recently released a new product, a grass-fed bone marrow. It is the whole bone extract, which includes the bone marrow, the cartilage, and collagen peptides. Our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal, including bones, and especially the marrow. All the nutrients and substances that your body needs to build, repair, and maintain your bones, teeth, and connective tissue can come from the bone marrow. It's a complex that contains the same components as home-cooked bone broth, but making bone broth can be a hassle. You have to source high-quality bones, boil them for days, and this is a simple, convenient alternative that's gently freeze-dried so it preserves all the nutrients completely intact. It's perfect for people who are traveling or don't have time to make bone broth themselves. Visit www.amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code carnivore10 to receive 10% off your purchase.
Yeah, there's a couple different things. One of the most important things that I realized is that anytime you're sort of hitting a caloric deficit and you're setting that as, okay, this is my limit. I found that it's actually helpful when we sort of increase their fat, which people are probably like, wait a minute, didn't you just spend the whole podcast talking about cutting back on the fat? But if you're already hitting a deficit, and we know that ketosis is muscle sparing, and we're focusing around these animal-based high protein foods, it can help when you're increasing the training to sort of scale the fat up a little bit as a percentage of your macros. So what we do is basically we go for sort of a 1-to-1 approach. So if we already know that you're going to be hitting 1,700, 1,800 calories, let's go for 1-to-1 in terms of grams. And that'll give us about 70% fat, 30% protein. And people will not only experience the satiety that comes from having that protein in the diet, but they'll also experience having enough fat to replenish the glycogen stores and to have energy for the workouts and for the mental focus and to be able to support their hormones. So that was one thing that was that I kind of had to learn over time, because at the beginning, we used to do a much higher protein and lower fat approach. And I just sort of realized over time, like, look, they're in a deficit regardless. So why don't we increase the energy calories and try to make this more sustainable? And that's something that I had learned from Robert Sykes, where when he's cutting, his fat macros are pretty high. And when I talked to him, I realized, you know what, you're in a deficit anyway. So you don't need to have this sort of extremely energy deprived environment where there's no carbs, obviously, and now there's hardly any fat. What are you training off of? So increasing that sort of the energy content of the diet has definitely been helpful for the participants that we've been with, as well as prioritizing salt. Salt has been a huge one. I probably don't have to preach this to your audience, but making sure that you have adequate salt and electrolytes, and preferably first thing in the morning. One of the things that I do and that I promote to our challenge participants is this sort of electrolyte cocktail that I do every morning, where it's, I'll have some water, I'll do a teaspoon, 1 to 2 teaspoons of Himalayan pink salt, and then I'll also do a scoop of this Ultima electrolyte powder. Mix that together, drink that back. And that's before I even start my workout. That's before I do any of that stuff. Because if you're already in this low carb diet, if you're doing things like drinking coffee, if you're sleep deprived, if you're stressed, if you're training hard, all of those things are going to deplete salt and sodium in the body. And you really want to replenish that for your energy, for your workouts, for all of that. So that's been another key component of the puzzle for us.
Yeah, those are some really interesting takeaways. And I like how you aren't dogmatic in finding that some of these people, especially when they'd been cutting, needed to increase the energy component of their diet, especially with the hard workouts. So that's really interesting. So shifting a little bit, William, I'd love to talk now about what you've been personally experimenting with and some findings you've had with your own diet. And I have a bunch of questions I wanted to tick through. But one of the first things, I think you're really big on this concept, and let me know if you're not, just from listening to a lot of your podcasts, it's around having kind of a meal template for the day. Like every day I'm going to have X many eggs, 2 pounds or a pound of beef, whatever it is. And like kind of having that base default diet. There's this lifting researcher named Eric Helms, who I respect a lot, who talks about the default diet. And then, depending on your goals, you can layer things on top of it or layer things off. But having that kind of default diet template in mind can be really helpful for people. So I'm curious if you're still, you still like that concept and if you still use it in some way. And if so, how has your default diet changed?
Yes, that's a fantastic point. And I love that concept. I'm totally on board with that. And that's still what I do to this day. So I basically just ask myself, out of everything I've learned, what are the best foods I can incorporate in my diet? Red meat, boom, right off the bat. So steak, ground beef, whatever it happens to be. Eggs, especially the egg yolks. So that's always in that daily diet. And then I ask myself, okay, so what about maybe some micronutrients or some of the different fat soluble nutrients? So some form of seafood, I always try to include that in there. And then I also try to include a bit of dairy in there these days. I've found over time that as long as I keep it in a moderate amount, the whole dose makes the poison sort of thing, my body can do it, especially when I'm training hard. I can do a bit of raw milk. I can do a bit of Greek yogurt, things like that. The reason I had issues in the past was because I was going at it like a pound of cottage cheese in one sitting. And I'm like, why would anyone do that? So if I keep that in moderate amounts, that's good too. So I view it basically as a checklist each day. I make sure that I have my 1 to 2 pounds of beef. I make sure that I have my 4 to 6 eggs. And I make sure that I have a little bit of dairy or a little bit of seafood. If I've had those, that's perfect. And if I just stick to those foods, that generally for me that'll lead to basically a pretty lean physique. And if I want to bulk up from there, I have 2 different options. I can either increase the frequency of meals. That's what I prefer to do. I mean, obviously the goal is to increase your overall your overall caloric load. But one way that I love to do that is just increasing meal frequency, which is something that is kind of new for me. And then the second option that I have that I can go down is to throw in something like white rice or potatoes in there, which, it's definitely going to lead to more calories. It's going to fill out the muscle glycogen. So those are the 2 options. But the baseline diet is always there. And I think that that's an awesome thing that if people can find out, hey, what's my baseline? What's my foundation every day? The great thing about that is then you don't have to think about that. It's automatic. Boom. Every single day, these are the foods that I'm going to eat.
Yes.
And then if I want to tweak it to my goals, I can add on top of that, which it just reduces mental stress in my mind.
Yeah, totally agree. And I really like that repeatability and having a default increases your willpower, decreases decision fatigue, all of these great things. And are you still incorporating a lot of liver or organ meats as well? I know that's one thing I don't think I heard you list, but you talked about egg yolks.
Yeah, I'm not eating actual organ meats anymore. I definitely am doing ancestral supplements and optimal carnivore supplements daily. I got some of Brad Kern's. I don't know if you saw the Mofo supplement. Did you see that?
Yeah, that looked really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and it was a great play on the name there. But I've been using that as well. So I definitely take those on a daily basis. But I have not really been doing organ meats recently. No.
Got it. So adopting Ted Naiman's lifestyle in every way. And
basically,
you talked about sources of protein. You said beef, like a lot of red meat, steak, ground beef, eggs, some seafood. How about shakes? Are you incorporating protein shakes still? And do you see a problem with getting, a decent amount of, or do you notice with yourself any problems with getting, more than a quarter or half of your daily protein from shakes versus steaks and animal foods? And do you notice a difference in how you feel or how you perform?
Yeah, I view shakes as sort of like a bonus thing. So I definitely have shakes on a daily basis. In them, I'll usually do a bit of raw milk. Sometimes I'll do some egg yolks in there, and then a scoop of whey protein isolate. And then I'll do maybe some collagen hydrolysate in there, put a bit of pink salt in there, and that's basically it. So I definitely do those. It's a very easy way to get calories in, very easy way to get extra protein in. Without the protein shakes, I would still be hitting anywhere from 150 to 200 grams of protein a day. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and including them to me is really just a bonus. And I feel like it might just add that extra, anabolic insulin spike to just sort of help with recovery, help with muscle building. So to me, it's basically just a bonus.
Yeah, that makes sense. And let's talk about carbs. So I know you had started to use like the occasional sweet potato or a cup or two of white rice after your lifts, to refill glycogen stores. I think that makes total sense given that you don't have adverse reactions to them, and you're lifting heavy. You're doing very hard workouts, and I think the basis of your diet is still animal foods. It's still carnivore, so I think that's perfectly appropriate. But curious, how has that evolved? I know on one of your podcasts you talked about using some oatmeal. Have you experimented with other carb sources? And also curious how you think about like performance carbohydrates, either refilling glycogen or before a workout versus, I know Ted Naiman has become more a fan of some of these higher volume food carbohydrates like strawberries. And he even talks about popcorn as a good source for people because you can get like 10 cups of it and it's still less than 100 net carbs. So curious how you've thought about some of those things and how you've incorporated some of them yourself.
Yeah, I basically tried everything kind of at the end of last year and at the beginning of this year. So I started experimenting with carbs in last September. And the ultimate goal was to basically hit around 168 pounds, but stay under 10% body fat. So I wanted to get as strong as I possibly could. I wanted to build muscle. And I also wanted to test how my body reacts to different carbohydrates, how my body reacts to different meal timings, if it's pre-workout, if it's post-workout, if it's a carb night type thing, if I need to cap the limit of carbohydrates, or if I could do a carb night thing and just go for it at night. I wanted to test all of those different limits and just see, for one, how does my body respond? Two, which is the most sustainable and enjoyable for me? And then three, what are the results in the gym? So that started with just simply doing potatoes and sweet potatoes. And then I started to include white rice, and it looked like more of a vertical diet template. I also did a carb night run for maybe a couple weeks where I was basically eating anything. And I'm not talking about the clean carbs either. I'm talking about pretty much anything, like eat clean carnivore all day, do a little bit of fasting in the morning. And then at night, it was like some junk food carbs. And I want to see how my body reacted to that. And then I also did a period of time where I was doing what looked a lot like a bodybuilding diet for about 1 month, where it was 5 meals a day. There was some oatmeal in the morning. I was doing meals with white rice throughout the day. And I'll tell you my experience from all of those. It's basically each of those approaches works. The most important thing is to find what's most tolerable for your gut and which approach you're going to stick to. I experienced really good results with the bodybuilding style diet, which I definitely did not expect. The only downside was just bloating and things like that, and dealing with some of that from the oatmeal. But I experienced really good results with that. Muscle glycogen was filled out. I had great workouts. So I really enjoyed that. And the other thing that I realized was that having that white rice in the diet, having those potatoes in the diet, it's a completely different type of workout. When I would go to train, you feel a sort of cushioning in your lifts. You feel a sort of leverage in your lifts that allows you to push so much harder, whether it's with, heavy squats or deadlifts or bench press. I was lifting numbers that I had never lifted before. And that was kind of something that I had never tried. Just how can I load up on as many of these carb sources as I can? So I think ultimately though, it comes down to what is your end goal? What are you trying to achieve? And for me, I found that, I do really well with white rice and potatoes. The junk food stuff, yeah, it's really not that great. You end up feeling like crap after a while. And when I was doing the bodybuilding style diet, I also got great results on that. But I did experience some bloating.
Yeah. So you're no longer doing the bodybuilding style diet, but are you still having the higher meal frequency and still incorporating some strategic carbs around your workouts? And how do you do that?
Yeah. So currently I'm not really doing carbs. For the past about 2 to 3 months now, I've basically gone back to my carnivore diet, having tried all the other stuff. And what I'm currently doing is a simple 5 meal a day carnivore template diet. So in the morning, it looks like pre-workout, maybe at like 6 a.m. I'm going to have a protein shake with the collagen and the milk and things like that. I'll go do my workout. I'll come back. I'll have some Greek yogurt and some hard-boiled eggs. And then for lunch, I'll have some steak. And then after that, maybe a couple hours later, I might have another shake. And then for dinner, I'll have more steak and some eggs. So doing that, I've noticed that I'm able to finally eat enough to really support muscle building. And also having that sort of frequency of meals throughout the day, it allows me to power through the day a lot more. A lot of people promote fasting as this sort of thing that's really going to increase your energy throughout the day and you're in the sympathetic nervous system state. I find if I'm not eating carbs, my energy is pretty good to begin with, but fasting was something that I started to realize was becoming a little counterproductive for me. So increasing the meal frequency allows me to get in enough protein, enough fat, to feel mentally alert and to feel good all day. And it also allows me to get in enough of the nutrients that I need. So if I'm only eating 1 or 2 meals a day, it's pretty tough to eat sometimes, 2 pounds of red meat, 6 eggs, and a protein shake and maybe some salmon. Like that's pretty difficult to do in 1 or 2 meals. But if I space that out, I'm really able to hit that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you have milk in the protein shakes as well. Sorry if I missed that.
Yeah. So I usually do a little bit of raw milk in there. So I'll do maybe 6 ounces of that. And
is that like full fat dairy?
Full fat. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think it's organic pastures that you can get at Sprouts or things like that.
Yeah. Lucky. That's a California thing. That's definitely a California
thing.
thing.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And are your current goals kind of cutting and leaning down for some of these roles you have? Or I guess if you were bulking, would you change your strategy at all? Would you try to reincorporate some of the other things? Or do you think this is kind of, at least for now, your default diet that you would stick to regardless of kind of your goal?
Yeah. Now that I've done this approach, it's very old school, like 70s bodybuilder approach, 5 meals a day, steak and eggs type stuff. now that I've done this, I would say that it's the most enjoyable style of dieting that I've ever tried. There's no afternoon crash when I'm fasting or anything like that. So it's enjoyable. I'm staying lean and I'm getting stronger. And that's pretty much, I couldn't ask for anything more than that. And I'm also, I'm eating the right foods. So the current goal right now, for the acting and the music stuff, I want to stay lean and I just want to continue to get stronger. And I'm able to do that currently. The only thing that's really changed to accommodate those goals is for me to hit the strength targets that I want to hit, I have to decrease the frequency of my training. And I can still keep the intensity and the volume there, but I just have to decrease the frequency. So right now I'm focusing on heavy and hard workouts 3 times a week. And on the days in between, it's just low intensity cardio. So maybe it's long brisk walks, or it might be a light jog. And I'll do that, just to accentuate some of the fat burning, to make sure that my body is still able to do those things. I feel like, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I always like to make sure that my body is used to that. But that's pretty much what it looks like right now. And I would say it's the simplest and probably most fun approach that I've tried in a long time.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I really like that, and how you've been not afraid to experiment and be transparent about your experiments with all these different things. And one thing around the training I wanted to ask about, it seems like you always kind of default back to this heavy strength work type training, 3 or 4 days in the gym, but you've experimented with more hypertrophy style training, higher reps, more sets, calisthenics a lot, of course. Mm-hmm. And the PE diet advocates this kind of, triple set to failure type calisthenics approach. Have you ever used that, or have you worked with that type of training before? And maybe talk about why you're doing what you're doing versus more of those types of workouts that mm-hmm. you and Ted present to kind of the masses.
Yeah. So the workouts that we promote in the PE diet, again, it's with the goal of what's something that everyone can do that is very difficult to make excuses around. And 15 minutes a day of body weight calisthenics at home with, the maximum requirement being like a pull-up bar. It's pretty hard to say no to that. So, and it's one set to failure, and it's a full body workout. So you do something for your legs, you do a pushing movement, a pulling movement, a core movement, and then some sort of a posterior chain movement. And that's something that anybody can do at any level. If you have to do wall push-ups, you can do wall push-ups. If it's just body weight squats onto the couch, you can do that. You can also dramatically increase the intensity depending on how fit you are. So it's a very, very simple program, and it works. And Ted's been doing it for a long time now. And obviously he has the physique to show that. For me, I do always default to sort of more of a heavy strength-based type style of training. I actually did Ted's style of training for about 6 months, and I liked it, and it was fun. And I was lean doing it. I had a cut look. The only thing is, it was very tough for me to build size on, to sort of build some bulk on. So that's the main reason why I always tend to stick with the gym. There's something about, just moving heavy weights that I feel like you just don't get from body weight calisthenics. Yes, a pistol squat is extremely hard, but there's something about squatting, 315, 365, 405 that your body just kind of bulks up. The powerlifters always say it takes mass to move mass. And that's just kind of how I feel about it. I notice whenever I'm really starting to build some strength in some of the compound lifts and, the 6 to 12 rep range, I start to put on a good amount of size. So that's pretty much my philosophy around that. And that's why I tend to stick with that training. It's mainly for physique goals.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And if I was coaching, my mom or dad or a busy professional, I would always default to, simplistic, easy to get done, doesn't require a gym, single sets to failure as often as you can. I think that's awesome. It makes complete sense. But if you have kind of, you're one of the 5% of people who have really specific aesthetic or strength goals, you're probably going to need to be using some equipment, some heavy weights. It's just a little bit different. William, what are you looking forward to in the next 6 months or so? You talked about getting back into some of these shows, but what other plans do you have, and what can folks expect from you?
Yeah. As soon as you asked that question, I lit up. The next 6 months are going to be fun. So a few of the things that I'm really, really focused on right now, music is one of the biggest ones. As you know, man, and as a lot of the people that follow me know, I completely believe in breaking past boundaries and pushing yourself and in finding out what your full potential is. I think that all of us have so much complexity and so many different interests and so many different passions. And many of us never really devote that personal development time to explore what those are and to see what could happen in life if I got into the best shape possible, if I started working on my mindset every day, if I pursued that passion project that I always wanted to pursue. So that's what I'm really working on this year. Music's been one of those things since I was a little kid. I've had a passion for. I always thought I sounded like a goat when I sang in the shower. So I just never even considered doing it. And I've really, really focused on that this year. So releasing music, people will be able to see that on Spotify, on iTunes, on YouTube. I'll definitely be posting on my Instagram, as well as the acting. So, appearing in The Rise of the Ninja, also Rise of the Hood, and in Solaris, and just continuing to build in all those areas, putting in that constant daily effort and building towards those goals. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most this upcoming year.
That's awesome. And I think I know the answer, but I have to ask, what else do you do for fun or to relax? Do you have any vices? Do you play video games or watch any shows or anything like that? Because I know you're hustling and I know you love that. But curious, folks want to know where's your kryptonite?
Yeah. I'll tell you guys, like, the way that I set up my life, it's so that I'm always having fun. That's the goal. Because if you look at a kid that plays video games and they play it all night for 12 hours straight, you don't come up and tell them like, man, you got a crazy work ethic. Like, you just don't give up on this. You work all night. It's incredible. Because they don't think they're working. They're spending all this time improving skills, going on missions, getting better at this game because they love it. And that's sort of the way that I approach the things that I do. I've sort of gamified it. So whether it's working to get our publisher for the PE diet, or if it's improving my voice, writing music, or if it's working on my physique, all of these things are things that I'm passionate about, and I just seek to add as much of that into my life as possible. But to your question, what's my kryptonite? I will tell you, I do hit a point either on a weekly or maybe every 2-week basis where I'll have a day where my body just tells me like, all right, we're done for today. Like we're not really into work right now. And it'll be like maybe 6 p.m. and I'll go on like a YouTube binge for the next 3-4 hours. And I'll just watch a bunch of different videos. And when that happens, it's usually probably needed. And then the next morning I just wake up and I feel guilty and I get right back to it. So, yeah, that happens maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. So I would say that's my kryptonite. But, besides that, I tend to love what I do and I don't really ever want to stop, and it doesn't feel like a chore at all, which is important.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like to hear that. And it sounds like, you've got it figured out in a way that makes it feel sustainable for you, and you're really enjoying it and finding fulfillment, not just pleasure, from the things you do, which is great. Where can people find out more about you? I'll obviously link to everything in the show notes and share it on all my social media and carnivorecast.com. But where can folks follow you and find some of the great work you're putting out, William?
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And Instagram's usually the best spot. So at William Shewfelt. And also my YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Will Shewfelt, which I think pretty well encapsulates what I'm about. We've got motivational content on there. There is a lot of carnivore content on there. There's music, acting stuff on there. So that there's also a lot of like day in the life vlogs. So that covers a lot of it. And then I also have the Will to Win podcast that you can find anywhere you stream podcasts, which has a lot of motivational, goal setting oriented content, mindset stuff. There's also a lot of health information on there as well. And then if anybody wants to sign up for the July Carnivore Shred Challenge, that's at 21daycarnivoreshred.com. And the upcoming challenge starts Monday, July 6th. So I'm not sure when this episode might come out. It might be a lot.
Yeah, we might be into the August one by then, but I'll make sure that I have the link to the website so folks can find whichever challenge we're on.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Great. Thanks, William. Really appreciate your time. Always great chatting with you and really, really enjoyed it.
Great talking to you again, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.